The Philadelphia Story was made at the height of Hollywood's golden era. 1939 had seen the release of Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and Stagecoach. And in 1940, The Philadelphia Story was in the company of The Grapes of Wrath, The Great Dictator, His Girl Friday, Rebecca and Foreign Correspondent, Pinocchio, and Bugs Bunny's screen debut. It was a seminal year for all of the Hollywood studios. The movie you will be seeing was among the most critically acclaimed and financially successful of Katharine Hepburn's films. And at the point in her career that it was released, she needed a success. In Variety, in 1938, the Independent Film Owners of America, Theater Owners of America, had publicly labeled her as box office poison, and her status at RKO Pictures had so declined that she was now offered only what were called B pictures, low-budget movies with undistinguished scripts, co-stars, and directors. With the encouragement of her fiancé, Howard Hughes, Hepburn bought out her contract for $75,000 and left Hollywood. But this was not a precipitous move, for she had financed the writing and production of a Broadway play in which she was to star, which had been custom written for her by Philip Barry, a playwright who had helped Hepburn in her early career by casting her in two of his major Broadway successes. The play he wrote for Hepburn, The Philadelphia Story, became a Broadway hit and had a 2-year New York run. While the show was on Broadway, Hepburn bought the screen rights. Some say Howard Hughes gave them to her as a gift. These rights held the key to restart her film career, and she used them to renegotiate her return to motion pictures. She did have something to prove, and the film she intended to star in represented a major challenge for her. When MGM, a studio for which she had never worked, offered to buy her screen rights for the play, Hepburn insisted on the conditions that she star in the film and have control of choosing the director and the cast. MGM consented. So, who did she choose and why? Well, this is not so hard to answer. First was the director, George Cukor, who was well known in Hollywood for bringing plays to the screen, as well as distinguished adaptations of classic novels. He was a director of impeccable taste and was known to be able to coax great performances out of actors and actresses. He was also known as a woman's director and had directed Jean Harlow, Vivien Leigh, Maureen O'Sullivan, Greta Garbo, Claudette Colbert, Joan Crawford, and later in his career, Deborah Kerr, Greer Garson, Judy Garland, Marilyn Monroe, Audrey Hepburn, Judy Holliday, Ava Gardner, Anna Magnani, and Sophia Loren. Cukor had launched Hepburn's career in 1932 and directed her in two of her most successful early films, Little Women and Holiday. And they were very close friends. Cukor had directed Hepburn in a Philip Barry property, the 1938 film Holiday, and he had advocated for her with Selznick to have her cast as Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. Hepburn told him that Selznick had considered Cukor the best transplanted stage director in Hollywood. Then there is Cary Grant. Hepburn had starred with him in 3 films, Sylvia Scarlett, Holiday, and Bringing Up Baby. He was also considered box office gold and was an actor who could play with his own dignity without sacrificing it. He was perfect for the role of Tracy Lord's ex-husband, a role that had been played on Broadway by Joseph Cotten. Early in his career, Cary Grant was a contract player at Paramount, and playing opposite Mae West in 2 movies, they saved the studio from bankruptcy. His screen persona fit perfectly with Hepburn's, hubris and versus modesty. Hepburn had worked well with him in the past. She understood the special chemistry and screen presence they had together. Cary had been known for his deft ability to tailor roles to his character. in a series of screwball comedies, he was encouraged by directors to improvise and to improve his lines. Cary had taken charge of his career, independently negotiating his salary up to $300,000 per picture and choosing his own vehicles to star in. Hepburn admired his independence and business savvy. He only commanded a salary of $175,000, over $2 million in current dollars, but he demanded and received top billing for this movie. Secretly, he donated his salary to the British War Relief Society. Then there is James Stewart. Although he was relatively new to Hollywood, he was chosen to play a major role in the film. He received third billing and accepted a low salary. Prior to this, Stewart had starred in 2 films directed by Frank Capra, You Can't Take It With You, and one of the top box office movies of the previous year, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, for which many felt he had been unjustly deprived of an Academy Award. He was to receive one for this film. Some thought to right that wrong. Stewart secured his stardom in the persona of the benign American everyman. His cynical and aggressive role in this film is out of character, and this adds tension to the film's narrative. He was perfectly cast as a sensitive, struggling writer forced by circumstances to work for the tabloid Spy magazine. The hand-picked supporting actors and actresses, the best that MGM had to offer, were accomplished film veterans and familiar to audiences. Then there was Philip Barry, whose play on which the movie is based. Early in her career, Katharine Hepburn had acted as an understudy in Philip Barry's play Holiday. When she arrived in Hollywood in 1932, she chose to screen test with a scene from it. 6 years later, she ended up starring in the film. She also had been in Philip Barry's play The Animal Kingdom, opposite Leslie Howard, who was responsible for having her fired. Over the years, Barry had looked out for her and tried to help her get roles on Broadway, frequently to his discredit, where Hepburn was fired from 5 plays in her early career. Barry's plays were mostly about the wealthy and combined very witty dialogue, amusing situations with highly vulnerable characters. They were popular and well-suited to the stage of the 20s. Hepburn's performances in these 2 Barry plays helped propel Hepburn to Hollywood. Barry, incidentally, was friends of F. Scott Fitzgerald and Cole Porter. Then there was Donald Ogden Stewart. Donald Ogden Stewart was a contract screenwriter at MGM and wrote the screenplay for The Philadelphia Story, for which he received an Academy Award. Stewart had been a member of the Algonquin Circle and was the model for the character Bill Gorton in Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. In Hollywood, Stewart was esteemed for his skill in developing dialogue and writing screen adaptations of contemporary plays. He was also known for his skill in polishing scripts written by others, and he authored many of George Cukor's screenplays. During World War II, as a member of the Hollywood chapter of the Anti-Nazi League, he declared membership in the Communist Party. He was blacklisted in 1950. And last but not least was the distinguished producer and screenwriter, later in his career a director, Joseph L. Mankiewicz. Hepburn's screen image was always regarded as rarefied. Cukor said of her, after giving her her first screen test, "She was an odd creature, unlike anything I had heard." From the outset, Hepburn's image was regarded as peculiar. Her aristocratic presence, directness, and nonconformity immediately distinguished her from other actors and actresses. She understood these characteristics permeated her screen performances, and Hepburn sensed her series of flops in films had to do with this persona. It is recorded that she said while making The Philadelphia Story, quote, "I don't want to make a grand entrance in this picture. Moviegoers think I'm too la-di-da or something. A lot of people want to see me fall flat on my face, close quote. And the character of Tracy Lord was crafted to fit this need of having audiences laugh at her indignity. This is so they would eventually sympathize with her. In the film, the indignities proceed in such a way that she is told off in no uncertain terms by nearly every character in the film. She is brought down. The Philadelphia story is a comic story of comeuppance. The theme of a rich ice goddess made human by the perfect touch and with the perfect timing. The character, Tracy Lord, must recognize her own frailties, reassess her criticism of others, and change. At its core, the movie is a comedy of progress and transformation. In certain ways, it is very melancholy. There is an extraordinary convergence of talent and ensemble acting in this film, and there is a unity of place and action. It takes place in the course of one day, primarily in one location, the Lord's Mansion in mainline Philadelphia, with the exception of the public library, the cottage, and the Spy magazine headquarters. We are treated with seeing the privileged in their mansion, with all the trappings, servants, silver, and horses. We are prompted to ask, what is the measure of a man or woman in a society of such wealth? Mike Connor, played by James Stewart, of Spy magazine, is sent to find out. The story is irreverent but gently sympathetic. Individuals are victims of their own environment and upbringing. Yet the story probes and is poignant. What baggage do we place on women? Who and what are they supposed to be? What pedestals do we put them on, or do they climb on for themselves? The privileged woman is put on trial. Spy magazine's reporter enables us plebeians to see the inner workings of a society that is beyond our realm and which we know little about. The wholesome reporter, sent into the fold of mainline Philadelphia, is our vehicle of observation, and the lines Stewart's character delivers about them are very perceptive. Technically, the film is rather conventional. There are few tracking, panning, or traveling shots, but there is a careful, pristine framing of all the action, an adept alternation of objective and subjective viewpoints, which maximize the cutting and underscore the film's humor and dramatic development. The insular environment of the play is opened by outdoor scenes and by interior movement within the mansion. Allegedly, there were no retakes in filming, and allegedly, filming took only 8 days. This, however, I find very hard to believe. MGM executives objected to Katharine Hepburn wearing pants at the beginning of the film, and they were afraid that censors would take out scenes that took place at night. Stewart was particularly uncomfortable with these scenes and was afraid they might have an adverse effect on his career. But in the end, Hepburn outwitted the censors and prevailed against MGM's objections. I don't want to spoil your enjoyment of the film by telling you this story, elaborating on the funny scenes, or dwelling on the great dialogue. I hate being a spoiler. The film did resurrect Hepburn's career. It broke existing box office records at Radio City Music Hall and was among the top-grossing films of the year, was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, won 3, Best Actor, James Stewart, Best Supporting Actress, Ruth Hussey, and Best Adapted Screenplay, Donald Ogden Stewart. Hepburn was awarded the New York Film Critics Award for Best Actress, and Hepburn, having negotiated for 45% of the gross profits, made a fortune and was signed to a contract by MGM. I hope you enjoy the film.